We can now promptly file to proceed with numerous policies that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis. And some of the cases we're talking about would be ending birthright citizenship, which now comes to the fore. That was meant for the babies of slaves. It wasn't meant for people trying to scam the system and come into the country on a vacation. Hundreds of thousands of people are pouring into our country under birthright citizenship, and it wasn't meant for that reason. It was meant for the babies of slaves. And we can now promptly file to proceed with these numerous policies and those that have been wrongly enjoined on a nationwide basis, including birthright citizenship, ending sanctuary city funding, suspending refugee resettlement, freezing unnecessary funding, stopping federal taxpayers from paying for transgender surgeries, and numerous other priorities of the American people.
To undocumented immigrants or visitors in 28 Republican states will not automatically become American citizens from July 27, 2025.
So I don't know if y'all saw the recent Supreme Court ruling. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to cry. But they sided with the Trump administration on nationwide injunctions, which was preventing birthright citizenship.
Birthright citizenship is not over. It's being left up to the states, basically. And the ruling that the Supreme Court had is going to lead to much worse outcomes. But I want to explain it in personal terms because people just keep reiterating the legal terms and it's getting muddled. The courts are not allowed to block executive orders across the nation, which means if you disagree, you have to fight it individually. And if you're not personally involved in the suit and you are elsewhere, you have to follow the executive order. A good example of this is if Trump decides to drop an executive order that limits people's ability to vote, or takes your guns away, or limits the ability to have a right to marriage. You have to follow that executive order unless you are involved in a suit that you file or get involved in with a bunch of other people to file.
When I first saw this clip, I couldn't believe it. The Supreme Court just gave Trump even more power and now birthright citizenship is being questioned. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, and today we'll be diving into the Scottish ruling that is making a lot of people nervous. If this is your first time here, don't forget to like and make sure you hit that subscribe button. So here is what happened. The Supreme Court ruled that federal judges can't stop certain executive orders. They just handed Trump more power and now birthright citizenship is on the table. This one is not just politics, this is personal for a lot of people. Most folks don't realize how serious this is. We are talking about undoing rights that were meant to protect the Black Americans after slavery and immigrant families today. So let's see how people are reacting about this.
Let me make one thing real clear. This ain't about injunctions. This is about erasing the 14th Amendment with a smile. We thought the courts were supposed to be the last line of defense, the place where liberty stands tall even when presidents go rogue. But on Friday, in a 6-3 decision straight down party lines, the Supreme Court told us, nah, we good. They let Trump sneak his foot in the door to cancel birthright citizenship. And they dressed it up in legal jargon about equity and injunctions. Oh, but don't get distracted. The real target was always your rights, especially if you was born with brown skin, immigrant parents, or ancestors who came here in chains rather than visas. For a second, it looked like the lower courts might hold the line, right? 3 federal judges had already slapped Trump's executive orders down with nationwide injunctions, telling him loud and clear, you can't just rewrite the Constitution because you feel like it. Immigrant groups were celebrating. 22 states stood up in court. Even the appellate courts said, let this play out. Then SCOTUS slid in like a repo man in the night. Instead of ruling on whether Trump's executive order was flat out unconstitutional, which it was, they sidestepped it and went for the technical foul. Universal injunctions go too far. God damn it. Basically, the court said that judges can't stop Trump's policies for everyone. Only the people who specifically sued. So now we're playing legal whack-a-mole across 50 states while Trump rushes to implement a policy that directly contradicts 150 years of law. So what's at stake, right? Everything. Let me break this down plain and simple. Trump's executive order says, if your parents weren't here legally, or maybe they were here legally, but temporarily, You don't deserve citizenship. Are you serious? The 14th Amendment that was passed after the Civil War to make sure that black folks were considered full human beings says all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens. It don't say except for immigrants. It don't say only if your parents had papers. It says all persons. A phrase so fucking inclusive. It slapped the face of Dred Scott and every slave master of the fucking Confederacy. So what Trump is really doing here is rewriting Reconstruction. The very laws meant to undo slavery. And the Supreme Court just handed him the pen. You thought Isengard was bad? You thought Voldemort was a problem? Justice Amy Coney Barrett, Trump's handpicked avatar, penned this majority opinion like it was a legal lullaby. With principles of equity, she says, while politely gutting the power of federal courts to stop executive tyranny. And while they didn't officially cancel birthright citizenship yet, make no mistake, they laid the legal groundwork to allow Trump to do it himself. In the dissent, Justice Sonia Sotomayor, she tried to hold the line, calling out how this decision disregards the long history of protection for non-parties. But her voice is now a lonely alarm in a house full of arsonists. This ain't about immigration. This is about control. It's about telling people of color, especially black, brown, or immigrant babies, that their existence is conditional. That if you ain't got the generational wealth, land deeds, or ancestors off the Mayflower, you're permanently under review. Today is birthright citizenship. Tomorrow is voting rights. Affirmative action, gone. Housing, gone. Education, you got it, gone. When does it stop? In the MAGA cult, oh, they're going to keep smiling in your face, talking about this is what we voted for. This is what the founders wanted. Don't forget, y'all, the founders owned slaves. They're not playing. Trump told you on day one what he was coming for. And this court just gave him the green light to drive through your rights like a bulldozer in a graveyard. So don't wait on the Constitution to bleed before you speak up. Because if birthright citizenship can be reviewed, so can your freedom.
So I don't know if y'all saw the recent Supreme Court ruling. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to cry. But they sided with the Trump administration on nationwide injunctions, which was preventing birthright citizenship. Which was preventing Trump's birthright citizenship executive order from going in effect. And so essentially it's a 30-day pause before whatever guidance they put out will go in effect, which essentially means that you can't do a nationwide injunction to curtail some of his executive orders, which essentially means that it puts 250,000 children. It puts 250,000 children in limbo. And we know that they don't want to stop there. They've already been trying to position to put U.S. citizens in foreign jails, which we know a lot of that will be black and brown people. And the Supreme Court basically said that they can rewrite the Constitution unilaterally. So it seems the only way to protect yourself or your child, and like, I'm trying not to cry, but as a mom, it's hard to imagine you not knowing if your child is safe. Citizenship is like the bedrock of the Constitution. If you're born on the land of the United States of America, you're a citizen. So for the court to put out this order and then not even comment on the merits, which essentially puts all us in limbo, it takes years to get to the Supreme Court. That means you can be a citizen in California, but you might not be a citizen in Texas. And we've already seen them use the National Guard to go and usurp the governor of California. And the courts have already ruled in that situation that they have the ability to usurp the governor and use the National Guard if they feel like it. And we all read that executive order where he wants to do that. So you could essentially have ICE agents going into hospitals and ripping children from their mom. Where does that stop? He's starting with immigrants, but we know that's not their goal. The architect of all this was the Heritage Foundation, with the use of Stephen Miller, with the idea that immigrants were making the country more diverse in order to quell that diversity, you have to essentially remove that population from the country. So now it's immigrants. Next, it might be nationalized citizens. Next, it might be Black Americans. And like, the 14th Amendment was made specifically because there were a bunch of slaves that did not have a place, that weren't U.S. citizens. So they had the 14th Amendment so that all people would be citizens. And essentially, all that's in limbo, as well as all of the other nationwide injunctions that were put against the Trump administration are now in limbo. The only option, it seems now, is to have a class action lawsuit, which takes a long time to farm, and you literally would have to have your name on that lawsuit to have any kind of form of protection. And there's no telling that the Trump administration won't argue that that class action lawsuit, that class, isn't illegal. Because let's say if you're not a legal citizen here, then what's preventing them from saying that you don't also benefit from our laws and the ability to have class action lawsuit? I'm so sorry I did this crying. Like, I just can't imagine. This is the reason why it goes back to, like, I don't understand why we can't have bold leadership in the Democratic Party. Do you see how far Republicans are willing to go? We don't have anybody on our side that is willing to go this far to protect rights. To protect rights. These people are going so far to rip away rights. Why don't we have any kind of leadership that is coming out to protect rights? Why not? Y'all tell me what y'all think about all this in the comments. Again, I apologize for all the crying. I did not mean to do that. It's just that I wanted to make this video to make sure other people are aware that essentially the Supreme Court has sided with Donald Trump, and in 30 days, everything just falls in limbo when it comes to birthright citizenship. Citizens, United States citizens, Black people, white people, we're not safe in this country because it starts with the immigrant. Then where does it go? We all know this story. It starts with one group to see how you will accept it. Then they next target the next group. Then they target the next group. Then they target the next group. But like I said, y'all tell me what y'all think about all this in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.
To undocumented immigrants or visitors in 28 Republican states will not automatically become American citizens from July 27, 2025. The Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, has limited the ability of federal judges to temporarily pause President Trump's executive orders, including that of birthright citizenship. With the Supreme Court ruling, it means a federal judge would not be able to issue nationwide injunctions for any case that challenges President Trump's executive orders or policies. Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship did not take effect because 22 Democratic states got 3 nationwide injunctions while the cases are heard on their merits. An injunction issued by a court stops a person or entity to do or not to do a specific act. The ruling, which takes effect in 30 days, means the practice of allowing kids of undocumented immigrants or visitors to become automatic American citizens will end in 28 states that did not challenge the Trump executive order ending automatic birthright citizenship.
Release a potential landmark decision impacting the future of birthright citizenship in the U.S. The justices were asked to roll back nationwide injunctions against the president's attempt to redefine the 14th Amendment, which states that anyone born in the U.S. is automatically a U.S. citizen regardless of their parents' citizenship status. It's been in place for more than 150 years. But now, in a 6-3 split, the conservative majority ruled that President Trump can move forward with implementing his birthright citizenship change, except for those who brought the case, the 22 states and a group of pregnant immigrant women who brought that case. So it's not directly getting at the 14th Amendment here, but this will have a nationwide impact. Let's go ahead and bring in our Devin Dwyer, ABC senior Washington reporter, who's been following the Supreme Court on this. Devin, it's not as straightforward as I think a lot of people were perhaps expecting or hoping to hear. So break down what this actually means.
Well, this was a big surprise, Whit, and this is coming from the youngest conservative justice on the Supreme Court, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, 6-3, as you said, in a big win for Donald Trump, saying he can move forward with that executive order that he issued on day one, changing the definition of citizenship in this country. Practically speaking, it means the president can, in the next 30 days, begin to develop guidelines for how he would implement that. It does not mean, however, Whit, that this executive order is free from future legal challenge. Legal cases in 3 different districts will continue on the merits. The Supreme Court, in oral argument in this matter, did signal that it was skeptical that it could stand up to legal muster. But at this point, the court is really weighing in on the ability of individual judges in districts around the country to block a president's action nationwide. And what Justice Barrett said today is that an individual federal court judge does not have that authority to broadly block a president. The judge, he or she, can block an individual while a case is being litigated, and in this case, that was upheld. So, this order, as it's implemented, cannot apply to those 22 states. It's going to be messy. It cannot apply to those particular pregnant women that are challenging this. But elsewhere in the country, and at the very least in the planning stages, the president can move forward, and that is a significant and surprising win for him.
Anchor babies may not be a thing anymore. Trump has a major win handed down by the Supreme Court today. Let's get into the details. The Supreme Court hands Trump a major win, limits judge abilities to block birthright citizenship order nationwide. The 6-3 decision, alongside ideological lines on Friday, sided with the Trump administration request to limit universal injunctions issued by federal courts. The opinion in the birthright citizenship case was highly anticipated. Universal injunctions likely exceeded the equitable authority that Congress has given federal courts, the conservative majority said. The court grants government's application for a partial stay of the injunctions entered below, but only to the extent that the injunctions are broader than necessary to provide complete relief to each plaintiff withstanding to sue. At issue was how the lower courts should handle President Trump's executive order birthright citizenship. On his first day in office this year, Trump issued an executive order declaring that children with parents who entered the United States illegally or on a temporary visa are not entitled to automatic citizenship. Immigration rights group in 22 states sued, and 3 different federal district court judges invalidated Trump's order, issuing what are called a universal injunctions barring the Trump administration from enforcing the Trump policy everywhere in the country. When the court's appeal refuses to intervene while the litigation proceeded, the Trump administration asked the Supreme Court to block the universal injunctions altogether. Major win for President Trump.
The birthright citizen case just came down, and Barrett's decision, she is writing for the majority, does not really get rid of birthright citizenship at all, but it only applies to the person filing the lawsuit from now on. So now what basically Barrett has done is take away universal injunctions in most cases from federal district court judges. What does that mean? That means that a president could sign an executive order that takes away your guns. And if you have money and you can sue, then you can get your guns back. But everybody that can't sue and can't go to court doesn't have their guns anymore. By taking away the right of a district court to file an injunction against the government, then she has created a 2-tiered system, a system for people that have the resources to fight against the government's illegal and unethical orders, and another group of people who can't do that. It is a travesty of justice that will be remembered poorly in the future when this is eventually overturned by a future court.
I know a lot of people are seeing the news right now saying that nationwide injunctions are limited. Again, it's limited. It's not gone away. They just made it harder. But for me, I think that is absolutely excellent. They're going to see how much chaos is caused by not just Republicans, but by our whole system of government. Now remember, Republicans blocked one after another of Biden's executive orders through these nationwide injunctions. Not only that, Republicans love to use this shit to shut down blue states. They go to their district courts with their conservative judges, and then they shut shit down. this is going to backfire on them because now you have literally given the blue states exactly what they wanted. Autonomy. They don't have to listen to whatever you fucking say in you fucking backwater states like Alabama, Kentucky. That's like called your name Arkansas. Okay? They can do whatever they want. You can go ahead and block it in your state and then you'll lose the people. The smart ones that they'll move to the cities so they can go ahead and do whatever the fuck they want. This is not a win for the Republican Party. They don't think ahead. So don't think about it as a loss. Think about it as, okay, it's going to be chaos. Yes, they fucked us again. They said, hey, figure it out, but we made a bigger mess. But in the end, the Republicans lose their best tool to stop fucking Democrats being Democrats, and that's free. I'm an independent. I'm telling you, Democrats, it's a win.
So on day one of Donald Trump's presidency, he issued an executive order. If you are born in the United States and one of your parents is not at least a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident, you're not a U.S. citizen. 22 states filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump saying this is illegal. A federal judge agreed and issued a nationwide injunction saying this executive order can't go into effect. And Trump appealed, not whether his ban on birthright citizenship is legal or not. He appealed that a federal judge can't make this nationwide injunction while they're litigating this case out. And the Supreme Court decided with Donald Trump. So they haven't ended birthright citizenship. They didn't make a decision on that. What they have said is, if you are a child born in the United States in one of these 22 states that brought a lawsuit, that injunction continues. You will be considered a U.S. citizen. You will get your benefits as a U.S. citizen, whether it's your birth certificate, your social security number, Medicaid, food stamps, whatever you're entitled to. But if you're a child born in the United States, in any of these other 28 states that did not bring a lawsuit, the Republican states, in 30 days from now, you will not get any benefits. You will not get your birth certificate, presumably, nor a social security number, nor Medicaid, nor food stamps. You won't be considered a U.S. citizen, perhaps even deportable. Baby deportable, imagine. The Supreme Court gave 30 days. So that means nothing happens over the next 30 days. So if you happen to be lucky to be born by July 27th, 2025, you're a U.S. citizen. You don't have to worry about anything. But after July 27th, you have to rely on new litigation that's expected. And they're going to make it a class action and make an injunction for each of those particular litigants, every person who's part of this class action, that Trump's ban on birthright citizenship is illegal until a final decision is made by the Supreme Court of the United States. So now, if you're an undocumented immigrant, even if you're legal on a student visa, and you give birth to a U.S. citizen in one of the non-28 states that joined the original lawsuit, you have to hope that there is a class action lawsuit. You have to know about that class action lawsuit. You have to be smart enough to join that class action lawsuit in order for your child to be considered a U.S. citizen until the U.S. Supreme Court makes a decision on Trump's birthright citizenship ban.
We have some breaking news coming from the Supreme Court this Friday morning. It has been ruled by the Supreme Court in a 6-3 decision that the lower courts do not have the authority to put a blanketed injunction across Donald Trump's executive orders. In this case, it was ending birthright citizenship, where there is no authority to grant birthright citizenship to children born of illegal residents or non-citizens. What the Supreme Court has said was they didn't determine whether this was a violation of the 14th Amendment and whether or not it was constitutional, but rather they ruled on the fact that lower federal courts cannot put blanketed injunctions and stop executive orders. Congress has never given them that authority. So that really speaks to what we've seen happen in the lower courts over the last few months since Trump has taken office. So that is still to be heard by the Supreme Court. And based on some of these rulings that we've seen over the last several weeks, I do think that the Supreme Court is going to rule on the fact that lower courts just do not have the constitutional authority to override executive orders. So going forward, the federal courts is particularly in this case of birthright citizen, only have jurisdiction within their states and within those plaintiffs specifically. What are your thoughts on this ruling and how do you feel about it? Do you think that the lower courts have been overstepping their authority? Or do you think that this is, important in checks and balances?
They wouldn't even say if birthright citizenship was constitutional. Are you out your fucking mind? Because in another 6-3 Supreme Court decision where the Supreme Court takes the Constitution, wipes their ass, hands it to you, and tells you to take a picture, the court has ruled that the executive order that overrules birthright citizenship can go into effect in certain areas because nationwide injunctions issued by federal judges apparently overstays their power boundaries. So Trump can go over his power boundaries, but the judges can't to stop him. Fucking great! Federal injunctions prevent immediate harm from shit that's unconstitutional. That's the fucking point. And now, they still get to go into effect until a court actually strikes them down. Surely the guy who's only known for issuing unconstitutional shit and blowing past his power standards won't abuse that power, right? If you're a MAGA chucklefuck who's cheering for this because Trump won, thank God you've been spared the burdens of intelligence. You're not safe either, Cletus. Guess what? In 3 years, when we have a Democratic president again, they can take your fucking pew-pews day goddamn one, and there's not shit you can do about it. You'll have to sit around and twiddle your thumbs while you wait for the courts like a good little boy.
Birthright citizenship is not over. It's being left up to the states, basically. And the ruling that the Supreme Court had is going to lead to much worse outcomes. But I want to explain it in personal terms because people just keep reiterating the legal terms and it's getting muddled. The courts are not allowed to block executive orders across the nation, which means if you disagree, you have to fight it individually. And if you're not personally involved in the suit and you are elsewhere, you have to follow the executive order. A good example of this is if Trump decides to drop an executive order that limits people's ability to vote, or takes your guns away, or limits the ability to have a right to marriage. You have to follow that executive order unless you are involved in a suit that you file or get involved in with a bunch of other people to file. That decision is on executive orders as a whole, which is very bad, but specifically the birthright citizenship has been put on stay for 30 days, meaning it will not be enacted until 30 days from now. So everyone who will be affected by this has 30 days to go to court or go to their district and have the state fight for them. As of recording this video, the Supreme Court has not voted on whether the executive order regarding birthright citizenship is unconstitutional or not. So the ruling was on executive orders as a whole. The birthright citizenship one has not been voted on whether it's unconstitutional or not, and there's no timeline for when or if they decide that it is or not. So as of right now, even though this ruling was on executive orders as a whole, the main important point that people are focusing on is birthright citizenship. And as of right now, it will go into effect in 30 days. And if you are in a state that is not going to try and block it, you are in trouble. This is a step towards authoritarianism. It is stripping our rights away little by little. We may not have ended birthright citizenship today, but it is arguably on its way. This is what Trump does in his business. Leave it up to the courts. Let's fight it in the courts. And while you're fighting, I'm going to keep moving this way. We can, and he just wants to keep these in litigation. Keep fighting them. That's fine. You guys can stay. But everyone else who's not involved in the suits or can't afford to be in these lawsuits, you have to follow. You have to follow the executive orders. Once there's less of you and we've dwindled this group down to a smaller demographic, then we'll just make something else. We'll make a new rule, a new executive order, a new Supreme Court ruling that then gets the rest of you out. That's how this works. That's the stripping little by little.
The Supreme Court just handed Donald Trump a major win by limiting judges' ability to block his birthright citizenship order nationwide. The Supreme Court just made a big decision that helps Trump and makes it harder for courts to stop his horrific policies. In a 6-3 vote along ideological lines, the court said judges could not issue orders that block a president's action for the entire country. Instead, they can only protect the specific people or groups who file the lawsuit. The case was about Trump's 2025 executive order that tried to limit birthright citizenship for children children of undocumented immigrants. Lower courts had stopped the order from affecting anyone in the United States, but the Supreme Court said those rulings were too broad. Now Trump's policy could possibly be enforced against most people while legal challenges continue, though it is still unclear. The court did not say whether Trump's order limiting birthright citizenship was legal or constitutional. It only ruled on how much power judges have to stop presidential actions. The decision means future challenges to the Trump administration's policies will be tougher because lawsuits may only protect the people who file them, not everyone in the country. The three liberal judges dissented, arguing this could let presidents ignore people's rights unless they each sue individually, something that many cannot even afford to do. For now, the ruling gives presidents more power to enforce controversial policies while courts decide their legality. It also means opponents may need to file many separate lawsuits to protect different groups of people. The case now goes back to the lower courts with new limits on how they can block federal policies.
And the Supreme Court just handed Trump a massive win. This is the case that everyone has been calling the birthright citizenship case, but the reality is they don't rule on the birthright citizenship issue. This is really about nationwide injunctions, but it's still a huge win for Trump. I'm Eliza Orland, career public defender for 15 years in Manhattan. All right, let me explain. Now, the court did not rule on whether or not Trump's executive order violates the 14th Amendment. Instead, they focused on how far courts can go when blocking federal actions. Essentially, what the court said was federal courts do not have the authority to issue nationwide injunctions. So they ruled on universal injunctions, meaning they can't block a policy from taking effect for the entire country unless it directly involves the parties in the lawsuit. So what does this mean? Well, it means the injunctions issued in this case only apply to these specific plaintiffs. And it means the rest of the policy can go forward elsewhere unless someone else sues. This is unfortunately a massive win for Trump because nationwide injunctions have been a critical check on the Trump administration in that courts have been able to stop him from implementing these policies nationwide that are truly harmful. Don't let anyone tell you that they ruled on the constitutionality of birthright citizenship because that did not happen. But by limiting who courts can protect, it definitely made it a lot harder to stop them. Decisions are still dropping. Make sure you're following because I will be breaking them down for you.
Based on what the Supreme Court did today, if anybody is having any conversations around birthright citizenship or citizenship as a whole, if you do not know who this man is, you should be ashamed of yourself because it's as a result of Dred Scott that birthright citizenship can exist. Dred Scott was enslaved by a U.S. Army surgeon by the name of Dr. John Emerson. Emerson took Mr. Scott to an area which would be considered between Illinois and Wisconsin, which at the time slavery was illegal. When Emerson died, Dred Scott tried to buy his and his wife's freedom from Emerson's widow, to which she refused. And this man, in the 1800s, sued her. This black man's case went to the Supreme Court in the 1800s. And one of the most infamous quotes that sets the precedence for how we are still treated in this country till this day as Black Americans was stated by Chief Justice Robert B. Taney, that Black people have no rights that a white man is bound to respect. The Dred Scott ruling of 1857 said that Black people were not citizens and that we were not even allowed to sue in federal court, that Congress had no power to ban slavery, which invalidated the Missouri Compromise, and that Mr. Dred Scott had no legal standing, although he was in a state where enslavement was illegal. Dred Scott passed 1 year later, never to have seen the abolishment of slavery in the 13th Amendment, nor the rise of birthright citizenship with the 14th Amendment. So let him be a reminder that citizenship has always been racialized and contested.
Well, they did it. The Supreme Court just ruled, not on the constitutional basis of the executive order against birthright citizenship, but instead on the ability of federal courts to issue injunctions to block the effects of this executive order, which means that the executive order against birthright citizenship can go into effect in different parts of the country. So again, this ruling was not addressing the major issue and question as to whether or not this executive order is constitutional or not. This ruling limits the power of federal judges to block the impacts of this executive order. And this effectively means that Trump and his administration are now able to define what birthright citizenship looks like and means through their executive orders and through executive orders coming down the line. This is one of the most impactful rulings we've seen this court issue in a 6-3 vote. It's also one of the most concerning because some of us know the history of birthright citizenship and what that means. But also, when you allow people to define and redefine what birthright citizenship looks like based on their own agenda, not constitutionally, but based on how they feel and what they deem correct according to their plans in Project 2025, this is dangerous. This is extremely dangerous. So again, just for clarity, they did not rule on whether or not this executive order was constitutional or not. They ruled to limit the power of federal judges to block the impacts of this order, which means that in certain parts of the country, this order will go into effect.
The Supreme Court doesn't know what it's just done. Today, the Supreme Court ruled to limit the power of lower courts to issue nationwide injunctions. Now, some of you might ask, how was this even brought about? Donald Trump has been signing executive order after executive order after executive order, many of which have come out to be flat out unconstitutional. And lower courts have been issuing nationwide injunctions to put a pause on these executive orders until everything is sorted out in court. Not too long ago, Donald Trump signed an executive order that would effectively end birthright citizenship. There was a nationwide injunction against it because it's flat out unconstitutional. And so Donald Trump took it up to the Supreme Court. And they did not argue about the constitutionality of birthright citizenship. This case was merely about lower courts being able to put pauses on executive orders. So essentially, with the Supreme Court's ruling, Donald Trump can issue this executive order ending birthright citizenship, upend millions of Americans' lives until the Supreme Court rules on the constitutionality of upending birthright citizenship. So to my Republicans who may be jumping for joy over this, I want you to think about something. If a Democrat gets in office and they start signing a bunch of executive orders to flood the courts, as Donald Trump has been doing, and one of those executive orders says all guns in the United States of America must be banned, lower courts cannot put a pause on it. And if the courts are already full with a bunch of cases that may be unconstitutional, it's going to take time for that to get to the Supreme Court, doing damage to the American system and democracy. And so now Donald Trump can implement this executive order to upend birthright citizenship, and for the foreseeable future, until the Supreme Court actually rules on that very key portion, people's lives will be upended. Folks, this is how a dictatorship begins. This is how the great American experiment goes wrong. There will be massive negative implications for the Supreme Court's decision today.
Before I end this video, I want to break this down clearly for people still trying to understand what's going on. The Supreme Court basically ruled that federal judges can't stop certain actions by a president, even if those actions could harm people. And with Trump already back in the office, that means he now has even more unchecked power than before. That's where this whole birthright citizenship issue comes in. Birthright citizenship means if you are born in America, you're automatically a US citizen, no matter where your parents are from. That's from the 14th Amendment, and it was originally made to protect the black people after slavery. The 14th Amendment wasn't just about immigration. It was created to make sure that Black Americans newly freed from slavery couldn't be denied citizenship and basic human rights. So when people start talking about changing or removing that law, it's not about immigration, it's about erasing protections that were put in place specifically for Black people. Protections that were fought for with blood, struggle, and history. Now imagine if they can mess with that, they can start questioning who belongs, who gets protection, and who doesn't. And if this starts with immigrants' children, Black Americans know exactly what happens when rights start getting pulled away. We've seen it too many times before. So yeah, this affects everybody, maybe not directly at first, but deeply and historically. So let me know what you all think in the comments. Are we overthinking it, or is this really a dangerous shift? And if you watched up to this part, thank you so much for sticking with me, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share to people that needs to see this. I'm Messi, and I will see you in the next one.